All right, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the first webinar in our Beef Brunch educational series. My name is Ashley Edwards, and I'm an Assistant Extension Agent and Coordinator for Animal Science Programs with LSU AgCenter in the Central, Northeast, and Northwest regions. With me today are LSU AgCenter Regional Livestock Specialists, Jason Holmes in the Northeast region, Lee Faulk in the Northwest region, and Vince Deshotel in the Central region. Together, we will be discussing different management practices and tools to make your herd more sustainable, particularly during times when the markets are experiencing some turbulence like they are right now. A few housekeeping items before we get started. We will be muting all of your microphones. We ask that you please turn off your webcams to assist us with faster streaming. If you are joining us online via the Zoom app or link, please enter your questions into the chat box at any time during the presentation. If you're calling in, you may text your questions to me. That number is 512-818-5476. Again, if you are calling in, you can text me your questions at any point during the webinar. My number is 512-818-5476. In the interest of time, we will wait to answer questions until the end of the presentation. We also ask that you please be patient if we experience any technical difficulties, as this is our first time using the Zoom platform. Sorry, I'm trying to get it to advance and it's not going. We're already having technical difficulties. There we go. Sorry. So as you can see, we have a handful of different topics to cover today, and the four of us will be splitting that up. So I am going to go ahead and turn it over to Jason Holmes to cover Know Your Costs and Record Keeping.
All right, thank you, Ashley. See if we can get this to advance. All right, here we go. So over the years, I have had the pleasure and opportunity to get to know some really knowledgeable and very talented livestock economists, and they've done a good job of educating a redneck kid from North Louisiana about the importance of economics, the importance of good record keeping, some things that that I probably wasn't that successful at early on, but with their help and the help of a lot of academia and just a lot of good opportunities of educating myself about the economics of beef cattle, particularly the cow-calf, and the importance of good record keeping. I think some of the information that we're going to share today is going to be very beneficial to you. So in Louisiana, we are basically talking about cow-calf operations. We hopefully you fully understand there are several different segments of the beef cattle industry, but for today's talk, we're going to be focusing on what our cow-calf operations can do here in the state of Louisiana in terms of good record keeping and good economics. So one of the things that we have to talk about when we talk about these economics and record keeping, but economics in general is we've got to be good managers of risk. So anytime that we venture out into the unknown, that's the scary part of, or the thing about risk is we're moving from known to unknown. So if we venture into deciding to creep feed calves, or we venture into preconditioning calves for a predetermined number of days, or if we decide that we're going to background calves, or we're going to retain ownership, every time we move into those different segments of the industry, we assume more risk. We've got to be good managers of that risk and understand what those, the parts of that risk that are out there. So the reason we always get worried about risk and we have to consider risk is because there's negative consequences. Anytime that we realize that and we become good managers of that, then we can manage that risk a little bit better. So the first thing we have to do is, in terms of good record keeping, is we just have to know our costs. If you do not know your costs, you cannot control your costs. So just knowing what your costs are, keeping those good records in terms of financial records, understanding where your money's going is the first and foremost thing that you've got to do in order to controlling those costs, is knowing what those costs are out there on your operation. We'll look at a spreadsheet in just a few minutes that Dr. Kirk Guidry, who is our ag economist with LSU AgCenter. For those of you that may be on this call that are in the Advanced Master Cattleman program that we've got going, you know that Dr. Guidry is working on us a spreadsheet that we can use for beef cattle operations. Hopefully we'll have that out available before long, but that's going to be a tool that we'll be offering for you to be able to keep up with those costs. So production management, increasing efficiency and output. So increasing efficiency and output doesn't always have to do with just numbers themselves. So that could be also increasing the quality of the product. So not just necessarily quantity, but also the quality of the product that we're putting out there. So reducing cow costs, culling open and unproductive cows. I know that's a really hard pill to swallow sometimes. And Lee Faulk, who y'all will hear from here in a little while, and he and I have had the conversation. Sometimes it's really hard to cull some of those cows because she misses a calf. Maybe she's gotten you a calf for the last 5 years straight, and then she misses one. But whenever the output of that, which would be calf sales, are as low as they are at this point in time, is it economical for you to keep that open, unproductive cow in your herd that you're going to continually be shoving cash at? Is it economical to keep her in the herd and continue to do that? So another way to reduce costs, cow costs, is move genetics forward. And what I mean by moving genetics forward is making sure that we're keeping heterosis, hybrid vigor in our herd. The closer we get to a straight line, the lower our hybrid vigor is going to get. So if we can keep that hybrid vigor, that heterosis increasing in the herd, then we should be increasing that efficiency. And Dr. Edwards is going to be talking a little bit as we go through this about some ways that we can do that with genetics, particularly with a little bit about AI, and she'll be talking about synchronization of heat at the same time. So marketing risk management, knowing the what, when, and how to sell. Knowing the what, and these are some questions that you need to ask yourself in your operation is, what is the product you're going to sell? Are you going to sell just a weaned calf straight off the cow, wean them on the trailer? And if that's what you're going to sell, then be good at that. If you're going to background calves, if you're going to retain ownership, know what you're going to sell and have a plan relative to what you're going to sell. When are you going to sell it? Be familiar with the historical trends, and I know I say that very cautiously because historical trends right now are out the window. But pay attention to historical trends in the markets relative to what stage you're going to sell at. So if you're going to sell weaned calves, you're going to be in that 500 pound range, 500, 550. If you're going to sell a feeder calf, you're going to be up into the 750, 800 pound range. So pay attention and understand and know what those historical trends are and when is going to be the best time historically for you to market that calf, and then how to sell. So we're going to be talking about some of the different marketing venues that are out there. So have a decision on how you're going to sell that animal. So production decisions affect quantity and value of the output. So what are some of those production decisions that we're talking about? So I had a conversation yesterday with a producer from over towards the Delta area, West Carroll area, talking about purchasing hay rather than growing and harvesting yourself. So look at, and those, the only way you're going to determine that is put a pencil to your operation and see if it's valuable for you to do that. With taking into consideration cost of equipment, which is astronomical, cost of labor, cost of inputs, fuel, fertilizer, taking into consideration all of those outputs, those are questions that you need to be asking yourself in this day and time. Are you conducting, and some of these decisions are not going to be, yeah, they're going to cost you a little bit of money, but whenever we started putting this together, every goal that we have was relative to not throwing out a bunch of suggestions to you that are going to cost you a whole lot of money. Some of these are going to cost you a little bit, but the output should be greater than the input. So breeding soundness exams on your bulls, are you conducting those prior to turnout on cows? A very economical way to provide a little bit of insurance for making sure that you get calves on the ground. Determining pregnancy in the cow herd. Are you doing that either through rectal palpation, through blood tests? Are you checking for pregnancy? That's one of the first lines of defense of being able to add another tool in your tool belt for effective culling of the cow herd. Maintaining proper body condition score. We're going to be visiting about what does that mean. Are you conducting breeding or body condition scorings 90 days before calving? That's your last line of defense before calving to make some changes in body condition score. So are you doing that? When are you doing that? Are you vaccinating the herd? An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So are you providing those vaccinations for your cow herd? Are you working with your herd veterinarian to make those decisions? Deworming, are you doing that biannually? Are you doing it 3 times a year? Are you doing fecal egg counts? I mean, are you safeguarding yourself there in terms of the efficacy of your deworming program? And another thing that I think doesn't get a whole lot of traction, but I think it's worth the look in terms of the cost of it, is growth implants. So are you exploring that? If you're going to be preconditioning on farm for 35, 45 days, are you considering the cost of the output there, the cost of that gain, or the value of that gain, not necessarily the cost, but the value of that gain for putting in those growth implants. So some of those reducing cost of some production, some things that we can look at, evaluation of the overall herd nutritional program. So the base of our program here in Louisiana and Southeast is forages. So are you evaluating your forages to make sure that they are meeting the nutritional needs of your cow herd? Do you have the forages that are out there that are meeting whenever she's at peak needs of those of the nutrition, whenever she's 90 days post calving and she's in that peak lactation period? Are you soil and forage testing on an annual basis? If you're just going out there and scattering out fertilizer without soil testing, are you doing it efficiently? And that's what hopefully we're getting across today, is just things that we can do to increase that efficiency in the herd. So forage testing, yeah, we put up some super good hay in Louisiana. We know that we can, but are you forage testing it so you know the product, that feed, that stored forage that you're feeding in the winter months? Do you have an idea of what that is, and then effectively developing a supplemental plan based on those forage samples? Improving grazing management practices. Do you have proper stocking rates? Rotational, controlled, or continuous grazing practices. All of those, that rotational and controlled grazing, those are going to require a little bit of maybe some temporary fencing. It's going to require a little bit of extra labor on your part, but evaluate those benefits of those different types of grazing practices so you can meet those nutritional demands with the highest nutritional forage that you have available. So that's being said, matching those forage resources to the cow herd at the different stages of production that she's in, whenever she's dry or pregnant, whenever she's late gestation, and whenever she's lactating. And again, like I said a while ago, that sound herd health management program is essential. So as we move on, maximizing efficiency equals maximizing profitability. So record keeping practices generally are going to include financial production and herd health records. We talked about some of those production records. We'll look at just a minute in terms of what are some of those financial records that we need to be keeping. Those herd health records, so we'll look at those in just a second. So the finances, some things that we need to keep are first and foremost, we need to know what our revenue is. So what is our calf sales? What are our cow sales in terms of coal cow sales, or if you're selling replacement females, or if you're selling pairs, what are our cow sales? And then bull sales, again, whether those are culls or whether those are actual production bulls that we're selling off farm. And then operating expenses. Are we keeping up with what our fuel and fertilizer costs are? Are we keeping up with what our herbicide costs are? Are we keeping up with what our medicine costs? So some of the big three, I guess, would be feed, fuel, and fertilizer. Are we keeping up with what those costs are? A lot of us have rent costs out there. Do you keep track of those? I've got a big note with an exclamation point on it, because a lot of us are guilty about not capturing that as labor costs. We have to include those whenever we're trying to capture or control what our costs are. We have to include, or we need to include, we don't have to, I don't guess, but we need to include those labor costs that are in there. And then some of those fixed expenses that may be out there would be things like insurance costs for the farm, and then interest costs on operating loans that many of us have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. And then some of those production records that we might want to consider. So first and foremost, it's going to be hard for us to keep good production records if we don't have good animal identification on farm. So do we have an effective animal ID system on farm that we can use to track cows and calves? Not necessarily just the cow herd, but can we track the calf herd as well? So we have to have an effective animal ID system on farm, whether that's just through an ear tag system or whether that's through a branding system. However you can effectively do that on farm, we have to have it. Keeping track of what bulls are in what pastures. Keeping a track of the date bulls go in and the date that bulls go out. So one of the things that Dr. Edwards is going to be talking about is establishing a breeding season. So we've got to keep good records of when those bulls go in and when they go out. So part of that production record of that cow ID is being able to track how old is she? How old is that cow herd? If you know what the individual age of cows is or are, that helps you keep up with what the overall age of your cow herd is, which can be directly related to productivity. So some other things we can keep up: calf date of birth, and what's the sex of the calf? Is it a bull? Is it a heifer? Keeping up with death rates. So whenever we lose cows or we lose calves, we need to be able to keep up with what those death records are. Treatment records. Whenever we doctor cows or whenever we doctor calves, we need to be keeping a track of what we treated for, what we treated with, the date that we treated. All of those are going to be important in terms of health records. That also helps us whenever we visit with our veterinarian. We've got those records that we can share in terms of when we treated, instead of us trying to, if your memory is no better than mine, sometimes we don't recapture that information as efficiently as we would like to. So keeping those good treatment records is definitely helpful. And then as we move on down that production line, so weaning weights, so that might be captured on farm, it may be captured at the next point of sale, but trying to capture those weaning weights, which ultimately will probably be translated into sale weights that we can keep back, and then we can relate those back to the cow that calf came from, and measure her productivity on the farm. So the point is to keep accurate records relative to the management practices you are trying to improve efficiency on. So I've just given you a laundry list of a lot of things that are out there that we can keep records on, but you need to keep them relative to what you're trying to produce or trying to improve efficiency on. So why do we keep records? So the cost of production, what it costs you to produce a pound of calf should be the starting point for your selling price. So if you know what your costs are, we'll look in just a minute at some of the break-even calculators that are out there, but if you know what your costs are, that should be your starting points for what's your selling price going to be on your calves. So all of those are going to be very, very important to you. Producers have little control over prices received for cattle, but we can control costs associated with production. And I think we all have to keep that in mind. And I'm going to say that one more time. Producers have very little control over prices received, but we can control the costs associated with that production on farm. A good record keeping system is the foundation of a good financial management and marketing system relative to that cost of production. And it also provides you that good snapshot of that operational performance. So all of those are reasons that we've got to be able to keep good records. So our biggest challenge, I think, for record keeping is what information is important to document. How do we document it, and how do we use that information? I think that is probably the biggest challenge that any of us, as we start to, maybe you're already an excellent record keeper, but if you're just starting and moving into a good record keeping system, I think those are our challenges: is what to document, how to document it, and how to use that information moving forward to improve decision making. And whenever we improve decision making, hopefully, and ultimately, hopefully, we are improving profitability. But foremost, those records should be efficient. Those records should be sustainable. We should be evaluating those records year over year, making sure that they are sustainable, and they should be manageable for you and your individual operation. So a few record keeping tips. gather it in a consistent manner and on a regular basis. Like I said a while ago about just regurgitating information, we want to do that on a regular basis. It's going to be difficult if we try to keep records or jot down some records every 6 months or so. Our ability to regurgitate that information effectively is going to be pretty difficult. Determine which management practices you want to improve and try to keep really good records related to those management practices. I don't encourage you to just focus on one of those. That might get us in trouble, but just identify what areas you want to focus on and do a really good job of keeping records related to that. Evaluating the data is a must. And why are we going to keep records if we're not going to evaluate the data and use the data relative to those records to help us make changes on our farm? By basing management decisions on carefully collected and evaluated data, hopefully we can measure the differences associated with those management changes and maximize our operations profitability. So I told you that we are working on a record-keeping system for cow-calf producers. Dr. Kirk Guidry, our LSU AgCenter economist, is working on this. Again, for those of y'all that are in the Advanced Master Cattleman program, you may have already seen this. But as part of that, I think this is a pretty important slide for you to capture just in terms of some of those financial items, those operating items, those fixed items that we need to be considering whenever we are keeping records. These are some of the things that we need to be trying to capture whenever we do start keeping records. Just an example of a cost and return by cow. So on the left-hand side, we have our cow ID. Again, that is very important. We've got a birth date there assigned to her. And what's the calf tag number? What's the sex, the sire of the calf? And that sire of the calf, you may have multiples in there in terms of the bulls that are in that particular pasture with those cows. So break-even calculations, these are just some of the ones that I think are pretty important for us to be able to use. They're very easy to use. So if you've been keeping good records, you're controlling your costs. You know what your cash costs per cow on an annual basis are. So your calf crop there, anytime you see that calf crop in these particular equations, that should be represented as a decimal. So if I'm talking about an 87% calf crop, I would reflect that as decimal 87. That's the numeric value that we're looking for there in calf crop. Average weaning weight. So again, we're going to have to be able to capture that weaning weight at the point of sale, or if we have a set of scales on farm, we can capture those weights there and be able to calculate some of these break-even costs per pound of calf, maximum allowable annual cost per cow, minimum weaning weight, market weight to break even. All of those would be exceptional calculations for you to use. But again, if you're not keeping if you're not keeping records, and you don't know what your costs are out there, those are going to be difficult for you to calculate. So with that being said, I'm going to give control back over to Dr. Edwards, and she will be discussing defining the breeding season. So Ashley, I've turned it back over to you. You should be able to get started.
Okay, there we go. Sorry. Make sure I can still click through these. So Jason alluded earlier to the record keeping aspects and some of the tools that I'm going to talk about in reference to having a defined or a controlled breeding season. And no matter what paper or article you look at, across the board, producers and researchers all agree that there are many, many benefits of having a defined or a controlled breeding season. The biggest thing is that we are able to produce heavier calves at weaning that are also very increased in their uniformity. And with that, you have more marketing options. Again, you also can work to make your labor more efficient. You're not going out to check cows and having a surprise calf on the ground. You know, there's a 90-day window or so that you're going to expect calves. And if you want to get even more technical with it, you can utilize tools such as chin ball markers or heat patches or something to be able to actually record the date that a bull did mount and potentially breed that cow. So just to kind of put some numbers to how beneficial this is, on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see a comparison of a 5-month calving period compared to a 2-month calving period. And you can see that with that 5-month calving period, they were looking at 100 cows in both cases, and you were looking at a weaning weight, average weaning weight of 480 pounds compared to 542 pounds on that 2-month calving period. So when you come to look at total pounds weaned, there is a large difference there, comparing about 48,000 pounds to 54,000 pounds in this 100 cow herd. So all of these tools that I'm about to talk about, you know, some of them have some prices to them, some don't. But in the end, when you sit down and you look at that comparison here, and there's data, you know, from multiple sources that show that, in the end, it does end up paying to have a controlled breeding season. Sorry, I'm trying to get it to advance and it's not wanting to go. There it goes. So the first tool that I'd like to talk about is body condition scores. So this is my low cost, pretty much inexpensive and pretty simple technology to be able to implement into your herd. And Jason mentioned it earlier. If you're not going out and assessing the body condition score of your cows and heifers 90 days before the breeding season, you need to be. You can go out and drive and feed and look at them, look at the ear tag and record these without having to restrain them. So it does require a little bit of training to learn, but there's a lot of online resources. The pictures that you can see here on the left are from the LSU AgCenter, and there are descriptive texts that will come along with that. So this is essential because we know that cows in a lower body condition score have lower fertility rates. So we want to be able to add some fat cover to them, but be economical in it and also not get them so fat they do not breed. So the key to that is keeping our cows around a body condition score of 5 to 6. We like to say that you want a body condition score of 5 at breeding in your cows, and you want your heifers, your first calf heifers there, to be at a body condition score of 6 at the start of the breeding season. Then when we start to approach calving, you want them all to be somewhere around a 6 because they are going to be losing some weight due to calving and all of the energy reserves that are needed for lactation for that calf. So again, make sure you're going out about 90 days before your breeding season starts. You want your cows to be somewhere around a 5 at the start of the breeding season to a 6, and your heifers you really want to be a little bit closer to a 6 there. It is not wanting me to advance these slides. There we go. Now I'm going too fast. Okay, the next tool I'd like to cover is estrus synchronization. And we hear this a lot for artificial insemination, but I'm going to talk more about natural service today. So a lot of producers do not realize that you can synchronize estrus or synchronize heat when you are utilizing a bull. So this will increase the number of cows bred at the start of your breeding season. It also groups them together throughout the breeding season so that if they do not get bred there on that first heat, you will see them bred hopefully in tighter synchrony in groups as your breeding season moves forward. Again, if you have greater uniformity in your calf crop, you are going to have an increased profit at sale date. Okay, buyers want to see that increased uniformity, And again, the earlier that you can have those calves born, the more opportunity they have to put on weight there at weaning or at your particular sell date. And when we start to compare this with artificial insemination, I want to point out that you can use a lot simpler protocols that require 1 or maybe 2 trips through the chute. So these particular protocols pictured here are specific to artificial insemination, but I want to talk about different ways that we can manipulate them or kind of change them up for natural service. So the 2 drugs that we're using in these protocols are either prostaglandin, which is indicated by the PGF abbreviation, or progesterone, which is on the CEDAR device. Okay, so a CEDAR device will have the hormone progesterone. So on the left, what you see is a 2-shot prostaglandin injection. And you can modify this particular protocol for natural service. And what you can do is whatever day you're going to turn the bull out, you can go through and give everybody a prostaglandin shot. You can monitor to see if those cows get bred within those first 5 to 10 days. If they are not bred by day 11, then you can give a second shot of prostaglandin, and that should induce estrus in just about all of the females within that 16 to 17 day period. It might take a little bit longer than that, but that is one option. The other option to modify this would be simply to give the prostaglandin the day that you turn the bull out. So you just give 1 shot of prostaglandin, and you're going to see a good majority of those cows, come into heat and be bred there at the beginning. And if they're not, then again, they should cycle back together and come back and heat together later on during that breeding season. So you can utilize either the 1-shot or the 2-shot protocol here. You're looking at about $2.50 to $3.50 per shot of prostaglandin that you give. A couple of key things to note with that is you do need a prescription to buy prostaglandin. So you do need to work with your veterinarian if you are wanting to implement a protocol utilizing prostaglandin. The other big thing to note is that prostaglandins, or administering prostaglandin, can cause an abortion. So if you believe that a bull has been out with your heifers or your cows, either one, you do not want to administer prostaglandin because it will cause an abortion on those females. The other protocol that we see here on the right is utilizing that CEDAR device that I mentioned earlier. If you are going to be synchronizing heifers, this is what you want to use. So heifers are going to need that hormone progesterone, which is on the CEDARs. And so you would want to insert this CEDAR device. It needs to stay in for about 7 days, and then you can remove it. It's an intravaginal device. It's pretty easy to insert and to remove. You do want to wear gloves anytime you are handling these, and make sure you clean the applicator in between. And you do have the option of giving a prostaglandin shot when you remove the CEDAR. That does provide tighter synchrony, but it's not always necessary. So you will still see some synchronization even if you don't administer that prostaglandin shot. You have that option. And a CEDAR is going to run somewhere around $13. Now, these are just a couple of examples of different protocols that you could use. If you're interested in implementing estrus synchronization for your natural service, you can reach out to me or your veterinarian, and we can work with you to develop proper protocols. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. It is not wanting to advance properly. So keep in mind too, for your bulls, that they are going to be able to service roughly the number of females equal to their age in months. So if you're talking a 2-year-old bull, 24-month-old, you're going to look at about 24 cows or heifers for that bull. Also want to point out that not all cows are going to be bred on that first heat. Okay, so he will run out of ammo trying to cover every single cow out there, but he will be able to cover a good bit that first estrus, and then again he'll be able to cover them later on as they come into heat again. Jason mentioned earlier the breeding soundness exams. That's another thing to put on your to-do list for 90 days before the breeding season. We recommend 90 days, but you're at a 60-day minimum. So you need to have a veterinarian come out, test your bulls, make sure that he is okay and ready to go for the breeding season. They will look at sperm concentration and motility, morphology, all of those things. They'll do a full physical exam and assess body condition score as well. Then the last tool to talk about here is pregnancy determination. So there's different methods that can be utilized. Palpation or ultrasound will work with bringing a veterinarian out. You're looking at $5 to $10 per head, depending on the number of cows that you have. Most of the time, honestly, they're going to palpate. Ultrasound is nice if you really need to know a little, like a week or so earlier, but it takes more time. It's just kind of cumbersome to get the equipment out there. So typically you're going to hire a veterinarian to come out and palpate your cows. This can be done as early as 30 to 35 days post-breeding, but a lot of times producers want to bring the vet out around 45 days after they remove the bull. So about 45 days post-breeding season. The other option that you can utilize is blood collection assays. So it costs about $3 to $5 per sample just for the test. And then you're also looking at costs for some syringes, needles, and the tubes to collect the blood. This is nice because you can look as early as about a month after you breed heifers or your dry cows. If you do have nursing cows, though, you're looking at a wait period of at least 60 days post-breeding before you're able to test them. So you can take the samples and you mail them into a lab and you'll get the results back within about a week. It does not take long at all. And again, it's anywhere from $3 to $5 per sample when you send it to the lab, but you do have some disposable costs or disposable supply costs there for the collection instruments. So while you're thinking about these costs and thinking that you don't want to pay that $5 per head or $10 per head, I want to ask you to consider what you're spending for that open cow. Okay, so Jason mentioned the need to cull open cows and that it is a hard conversation to have and a hard thing to decide sometimes, but you're looking at an economic loss of anywhere from $500 to $1,000 or potentially more just for having that open cow each year. So it does pay to utilize pregnancy determination in some sort of manner. It will be worth it in the long run when you start to sit down and you keep those good records and you do look at your cost analysis. And then the last thing is just, again, keep those records. So if you're utilizing a natural service, utilizing a bull for natural service, make sure you have the dates that you put the bull out, the dates that you take him away from the cows. If you're artificially inseminating, you can put those dates, what bulls were turned out. If you have multiple bulls out in a pasture, you can utilize those chin ball markers and have different color paint out there to be able to identify which bulls mounted each cow. You might have multiple bulls mount a cow, but you kind of narrow down what's going on there. You want to assess your calving interval, those days between your calving dates, because if you're looking at a long time for her to rebreed, she might not be worth keeping in the herd. And again, always body condition score. I hit on it with the cows and the heifers, but make sure your body condition scoring your bulls as well. And with that, I will turn it over to Vince to discuss preconditioning.
All right, Vince, you should have control of it now, Vince.
I'm with Ashley on the screen. The slide's not one to advance. I'm trying to back it up, actually. Okay, here we are. All right, thank you, Jason. Thank you, Ashley. And preconditioning is a practice that we all should consider in this this times of a failing market. Looked at the Chicago Board of Trade right before getting on this Zoom meeting, and it's down again today, folks, and it's not looking any better. And I've been in the cow-calf operation for more than 30 years now, and I'm been more scared the last 3 weeks with fall calves ready to be weaned than I have been in the last 30 years. So and I'm sure some of you tuning in today is in the same situation, but we got to do the things that are most beneficial to us as a cow-calf operator regarding making the most out of what we have. So that screen, I'm just not getting it to go forward, Jason.
I tell you what, man, for time constraints, and I know it's awkward, but just tell me when you want it to advance and I'll advance it for you. How about that?
That'll work. So when we talk about preconditioning programs, some of this is going to involve a series of management practices. If you don't have those in place at the farm level, certainly need to improve that, or make sure the health conditions and nutrition of those calves are in place. As we've all come to learn, nutrition is the basis for all of our problems that we generally encounter. So relatively speaking, good nutrition computates to good health in most situations. So we want to make sure we're on the up and up as far as health and nutrition. So it's known, and I mean, I've experienced it. Preconditioning calves will definitely add value, and that's the the buzzword, preconditioning or backgrounding today, buzzword amongst buyers. And if you have a reputation with previous buyers that have purchased your calves before, know your genetics and know the outcome, you're not going to have any trouble marketing those animals, knowing that they've got that 35 or 45 and even up to 65-day backgrounding period behind them. So in preconditioning calves, as marketing in a marketing system that recognizes those values, definitely a benefit to you as a producer at the level, at the farm level, because in today's times, it's definitely something that we need to power up as far as our bottom lines are being challenged right now. Go ahead, Jason. So when we talk about weaning, most preconditioning programs include a 45 to 60-day post-weaning adjustment. And just my suggestions from experiences, you probably need to have a protocol of vaccines incorporated into that pre-weaning, at least one round of those shots, which may include a clostridial type vaccine and also a respiratory vaccine going into that weaning period to ensure that the health is going to be in place, because there's going to be an undue amount of stress involved with the weaning process. As we talked about nutrition, the majority of the cost of the background or weaning process is going to be the cost of feed. In today's world, bag feed is untouchable in most cases. If you're going to feed 40 to 50 calves or any amount of calves that may be coming into the preconditioning process. So you may want to consider buying some bulk feed sources, or have some high quality forages on hand ready to bale in such a case. When we talk about bunk and water trough training, we certainly need to have, in my case, I fortunately have a couple of calves, the age of the calves I'm going to wean here shortly, that have been on a nurse cow for some unfortunate reasons, but they're on feed. They're the same age as the calves that are going to soon come into the weaning lot, so they know what water, the bunk feed and the water trough is all about. So we're gonna hopefully train those calves coming off pasture with those couple of animals. So have a little scheme and a little management plan in place to get those things accomplished. So some management practices to improve value. It goes unsaid. Castration is the inevitable. Selling bulls in today's world is not price conducive, I guess, so to speak. Definitely dehorning if you're raising some characteristics in cattle that have horns, you certainly want to dehorn those calves while they're still suckling, so the mamas can help them heal up and get cleaned up. As far as health protocols, we definitely want to consult with our local veterinarians to know what's local to the area on how to treat those animals. And many of our veterinarians are tied at the larger scale or the higher level of what's needed going into the feed yard situation. So make sure you have a veterinary client relationship ongoing so you can get those protocols in place. One of the last things we talk about as far as the preconditioning, uniformity, and we'll get a little bit more into that in a slide a little bit further on, but we definitely uniformity as far as size, weight, color, and that kind of thing. Jason, you can go ahead. So some weaning methods we want to talk about. The fence line weaning has proven to be probably the lowest stress level that we can offer to a cow and a calf being separated from one another. They can still smell each other, still see each other, and usually in a 3 to 4, maybe 5-day period, that weaning process is that cow has moved away. He's going to his feed stuffs that you provided, and drinking, taking to the shade, and just kind of commingling with his herd mates. So abrupt separation and moving the cows away. You better have good fences because those cows are coming back to look for those babies, especially if they have any kind of Brahma influence in them. So be prepared for that. Good fences make good weaning practices. The anti-suckling device, if you got gentle cows that are up and close at hand every day, and you can do that, that's one way to do it. Not widely used, but it is a successful way to wean calves off. But it is a little more cumbersome. You have extra management practice of getting that nose piece in there and taking it out when the practice is done. Okay, Jason, go ahead. So when we talk about nutrition, the main goal is to supply calves with all their nutritional requirements. A variety of rations exist and we can formulate those. I've done some of those for my clients here locally and in the region that I work. We've done that through our research stations and scientists that are there. So if you have an idea about a ration you want to have formulated, we can work with you through that. There's some bulk feeds that are out there that are easily accessible at reasonable prices. But if you can, try to focus on a forage-based diet. That's usually the cheapest. In that case, we got ryegrass and clover hay on the ground that we cut on Sunday that we can hopefully bale one afternoon this week, and that should provide some good nutrition for those calves we have coming to weaning. So, as we mentioned that, the forage is probably going to be the cheapest way to go, and you may want to supplement with some higher protein supplements as you feed those forages and get them settled down on feed. Go ahead, Jason. Again, nutrition, feeding and supplementing with a ration given, even the grazing calves teaches them to eat, out of a bunk while they're still out grazing. You should maybe, if you're going to crib feed them, that teaches them, how to eat a little bit as they're with their mothers. Feed needs to be palatable, and the calves need to have clean bunks each day before the amount of feed is increased, because calves are going to climb into those bunks. They're going to get into the water troughs those first 2 or 3 days, being away from their mothers. So that's where the extra labor comes in, and the extra intensity as far as managing those calves. It's going to be frustrating for the first 2 or 3 days because they're going to be into everything, trying to get through fences and what have you. So you do not want to increase or decrease by more than 10% at one time. Should be a slow introduction and ease into that nutrition, not to get their ruminants sick coming off of that milk. So go ahead, Jason. So some of the benefits of castrating and dehorning, as we collected some of the information from some of the universities that we have referenced here. Castration, it goes without saying. It can add 5 to 15 cents per pound at the auction. Dehorning, pole versus dehorn, you can take advantage of probably a 25 cent price increase. For example, on castration, a 500-pound steer at $1.50 will bring roughly $7.50, which that's unheard of today. We're quite a bit lower than that. So that bull calf versus that steer calf, you're looking at a $75 per head decrease in price. So take a little time if you're not experienced with it. There's cowboys all around you. Call a few of them that know what they're doing, and they'll get you calves castrated in afternoon's time and get you, save you some money or increase your value for your calves. So go ahead, Jason. When we talked about health programs, we mentioned some of this previously. Preconditioned calves are known to have fewer post-weaning problems. Get with your veterinarian, get those first round of shots in them before they come off their moms. That's going to help some of the health problems you may encounter if they just come off balling without shots in them. Some market outlets that may specify which vaccine programs and requirements. If you've been on any of the video markets and some of the larger marketing schemes as far as putting load lots together with some of your neighbors, or if you have enough to do that on your own, you definitely want to get with the buyer or the contract person to make sure those vaccine protocols are in place when market time rolls around. Always, again, work with your veterinarian. A lot of people don't do this. We strongly recommend that you have that vet-client relationship. In the case of a VFD or you need antibiotics that can no longer be purchased over the counter, you will have some sick and some issues that require veterinary attention. Parasite control, often overlooked, but varies by region greatly. As in my area on down south, we tend to have a lot of problems with parasites and flies and what have you. So be sure to treat both internal and external. Go ahead, Jason. So when we start to wrap up, uniformity is probably one of the things we close with that's going to have the most effect on how these calves are going to market and what's the returns are going to be coming your way. So to increase uniformity in your herd, we definitely want to define breeding season as Dr. Edwards spoke of. Tighten up those calving dates, and if it takes a sync protocol to get your bulls to breeding those first calf heifers or young cattle that may not be breeding back in that 90 to 120 day period, you definitely want to synchronize those to force them to do that. Maintain good herd health and vaccination protocols. In optimizing herd nutrition, we often see overstocking. Make sure that cattle you're not overstocked and you got the nutrition that supports good promotion of beef production. Increase genetic uniformity. If you're going to breed multiple sires, try to buy bulls that are closely related, that are going to give you the same outcome as far as weaning weights and color and size and uniformity in that group of calves you're going to be taken off to be marketed, because that has a big influence on the pricing. As far as dehorning and castration, that's kind of a no-brainer as far as marketing calves. The horn issue, buyers don't like loading horn calves on big trucks, and they have a long travel sometimes from the point of purchase to their destination, whether wheat pasture or going into a feed yard. Horns cause bruising, and that's a big downfall as far as the carcass quality and stuff when they if it's bad enough in most situations. Castrate early, definitely when calves are 1 to 3 months of age. After that, the stress rises greatly, especially when they get up to 4, 5, 6 months of age. Definitely consider doing that within 1 to 3 months. So as we talk about those things, frame size, muscling, and fleshing, don't try to add too much flesh. Buyers want to buy a hard calf that's ready to grow and put flesh on. So don't focus on putting too much flesh on them. Get them hard and feeling good and healthy. Constant weight, we want to see weights that are most constant or alike. Color, either black-hided or white-hided calves seem to be the selling colors these days. But if you got any kind of off colors, maybe plan to market those separately or away from that majority of uniform groups. Again, health and the sex of those calves. If you can put loads of steers together, loads of heifers together, it's going to be more advantageous to the buyer to have those things in place. So with that, I'll close, and good luck to you in your marketing strategies and calf background and coming up. Oh, I'm not finished. I'm sorry. So here's one of the charts that we pulled together as far as some of the costs that may be involved. We compared the Noble Foundation to Oklahoma's Beef Quality Network, Kansas State, and Oklahoma State. So some of the feed costs or the backgrounding costs range from $49 to $60, roughly $50 to $65, depending on what you put into them. So when we look at the bottom line, we range from a net gain from just $2 a head to roughly $60 a head, depending on the cost involved. You know, there's a lot of consideration. Try to keep it economically sound for your situation, and it all depends on the feed stuff. As we mentioned, feed's going to be your greatest cost involved with as far as the maintenance of this backgrounding period. Go ahead, Jason. So management variables that should be factored into the decision making, certainly top of the list, death loss. That's the biggest risk. Health supplies, including vaccines, roughly about $5 a head, depending on what you choose to go with. Definitely, but refer to your veterinarian for that. Mineral cost, less than 20 cents per day per head. Naturally, you're gonna have increased labor. If you're a one-man show like I am, get your children involved, nieces, nephews. Occasionally, maybe you can get your wife out there to put some water in those tubs. But try to get, keep your labor costs down in these times with declining prices. So need for additional equipment. You'll definitely need more bunk space. Certainly more water troughs as the daytime heating is going to increase. If you're going to be weaning calves here in the short run before the summer months arrive, make sure you have plenty water trough space. The big question is, do you have that location where calves can be weaned? You need good fences, pipe fence yards that are constructed well and will maintain those, the distance between those calves if you choose to do fence line weeding between their mothers. So, and then certainly the interest on your cattle loan, if you have money borrowed on these cattle, that's going to be an expense during this weaning period. So make sure that you're on cue with that as far as taking care of your loan proceeds. Discounts if calves get too fleshy. We mentioned that earlier. The focus here is not to, for them to be gaining and putting on flesh in this period, but them to maintain and be that weight that ideally you would want to market here going forward.
All right, thank you, Vince. We're going to move into selling versus marketing cattle, and just focusing on what some of those differences are there. So most cow calf producers that I know, the way that most of us are raised is we sold calves, and that's what we were conditioned to do. We sold calves. We produced a calf that was the easiest and the best for us to raise, sell at the most convenient market outlet for us, and sell at the most convenient time for us. That's just the way it's always been. But what I challenge you today is consider the differences between just selling your cattle and actually being a good marketer of your cattle. So we almost have to be good salespeople in order to get some of those value-added prices for our cattle. So what I mean by marketing is we're making choices about how or what product to produce, where to market it, and when to price it. So whenever we do that, we do gain some control over the prices that we receive. Are we going to gain 100% control? Absolutely not. I mean, that's because of the market that we're in, that's not possible. But we can gain some control over the price that we receive at the next point of sale or at that point of sale. So I just challenge you today to consider some of those statements. So profitable marketing includes producing the type of item desirable to the market and the buyer. So like I said a while ago, we've got to be good salespeople. It's not simply just producing a calf, taking it to the most convenient spot and selling it. We got to be good stewards in terms of going out there, producing a product that that point of sale wants, that buyer. We have to produce a product that they want and that they are willing to give a higher price than just what the average is. And that's what we're trying to get. That's the whole goal of today, is just trying to increase a little value to the product that we have. I've had a lot of conversations. Lee Faulk and I have had several conversations about it's difficult for us to see guys that have been in the cow-calf business for decades and sometimes centuries struggled at the way that they are now. So that was the driving force behind doing this, is just trying to increase a little value to the products that we're going to produce. We hope that y'all are going to continue to produce them. So if we can add a little bit of value to that, it encourages us to stay the course. So some things that whenever we are talking about profitable marketing, some things that we need to take into consideration is time of year. Supply and demand. Follow and know what supply and demand curves look like on a historical basis in beef cattle markets relative to the chain that you're trying to sell into. Look for when supply is down and demand is up. That way is not always feasible, but it can be ideal if you hit that market at the right time. What age will you be marketing your calves, and what do markets look like at that time? So again, decision making. Know ahead of time, I'm going to market my calves at 550 pounds. Looking at historical markets, what time of year is going to be best for me to market those calves? A lot of times we have to schedule that around calving season. So that's why a lot of our calving seasons are situated where they are, is because historically, whenever those calves are coming weaning time, we can optimize value for those calves at that time. The form of the product being sold. Are we going to precondition calves, just like what Vince talked about? Are we going to sell them straight off the cow? Are we going to wean them on the trailer? Are we selling exposed bred females versus open cows relative to some cull cows? And then the place, selecting the best location and buyer to meet your goals. So once you've made those decisions and you've got those goals in mind, selecting that location that's going to be best for you. So understanding the relationship of the supply and demand at the retail level is going to be important. Knowing your production costs goes back to keeping records. Again, important. What is it costing you? Annual cow costs, and those are going to be directly related to cost per pound of calf produced. Those are going to be important decisions for you to be able to make. So some short-term, medium-term, and long-term decisions that should be made. Short-term decisions, are you going to creep feed? Are you going to precondition? Medium-term decisions, are you going to background? Are you going to graze? Are those going to be profitable this year? Long-term, some of those decisions that you might want to be making is how many cows are you going to keep? How many cows are you going to have on your place? And are you balancing that with the forage resources that you have on hand in order to make those decisions with how many cows? So you've got to be able to create that list of marketing alternatives for each aspect of your operation. So what are your marketing alternatives for your calf crop? What are your marketing alternatives for those cull cows? And you've got to be able to develop a list of informational sources of people that can help assist you with creating that marketing plan. Y'all, there's a lot of good, smart people out there that can help you do that. We've got some really good folks with the AgCenter that can help develop those plans. Work with the next phase of where you're planning on selling those at. Work with those people and help develop in those decisions. And then keeping up with the markets. So I'm going to put a plug in here for the price and production summary that we keep up with and send out every month. So that's just a good venue for you, or a good option for you in terms of keeping up with what the markets look like. Y'all, there's a lot of good products out there for keeping up with markets. All we're encouraging you to do is to study the markets, keep up with the markets, and use that information as a tool as you move into that marketing phase. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lee Faulk. He's going to be talking about marketing methods and alternatives. And Lee, again, for time's sake, if you will, just tell me when you want to advance the slides, and I'll do that for you.
Okay, thank you, Jason, and good morning, everyone. Appreciate you tuning in on this. A lot of good information has been shared. We talked about some strategies, so forth, throughout the presentation about marketing cattle. We're going to talk just briefly about some marketing methods, and we're going to go through some options maybe you're familiar with, and some that you might not be. So go ahead, Jason. We'll just jump straight to the next slide. We can't have any conversation about marketing cattle without first and foremost mentioning sale barns. Livestock auction barns have been the most traditional way of selling cattle. They're the preferred method for many producers, large and small still. And there's a lot of advantages to using auction barns as we move forward in the cattle industry. Of course, convenience. We all have our local barns that we can go to. I bet that there's quite a few less barns than what there used to be in the state of Louisiana, and in the region where I am, that there's quite a bit less barns than what used to be. Sale barns can provide competitive bidding. You get a lot of people trying to determine what your cattle are worth to them on that day. They're open most weeks of the year. It's mandated that they have a certain number of sales per year as part of their charter. So that is a good thing that they're able to, you're able to get cattle moved whenever you can get them pinned or whenever you choose to market them. You can move all classes of cattle. You can take cull cows, you can take a bull that is injured, you can take yearlings or calves, whatever the class of cattle you're trying to market. And it's open to any buyer or seller, pretty much open door there. You do get prompt cash payment. Sale barns are governed under Packers and Stockyards. It's administered through the USDA. So they do have financial things in place, regulations in place that can protect the seller and the buyer. And it doesn't require any knowledge of cattle markets to sell. You just pull up, unload your cattle, give them your name and address, and you're good to go on that. Prices are determined, and most of these sale barns now, although we don't have a state market report per se for the whole state as far as auction barns go, most of these sale barns do have social media pages, Facebook, so on and so forth, that they are posting price updates. You can see what's transpired at the most recent sale. Although here recently that hadn't been good, and it's not been a good market report no matter which one you look at. Okay, Jason, we can move on to the next one. Some disadvantages though. Sale barns aren't perfect, and I'll go over a few of the disadvantages marketing cattle through sale barns. Unless you set a PO price on your cattle, whenever you send them through, there is little control over the prices. Overhead cost is high. If you don't realize, and I talk to a lot of people that really question commission rates and want to know why commission rates are set as where they are and so forth. It costs a lot of money to run a traditional sale barn. Next time you're at your local livestock market, you look at how many people they have working in the back at the facilities that they have, the upkeep that it takes, the labor, like I said, equipment, time. It really adds up. So that's why those commission rates are set the way they are. If you're buying cattle out of sale barn, of course, you know about disease spread, and you can bring some stuff on your place if you're not careful about that. Prices can be uncertain, especially in challenging times like now. You may see a wide variation at the larger sale barns. You can actually see some price variation during a sale, depending on what the feeder cattle futures market's doing. Depending on the time of year you sell cattle, shrink can be a huge issue, especially this time now. When you're pulling these cattle off ryegrass, you got these cattle that can really be subject to a lot of shrink, especially if you have a sale that's on, say, a Thursday and you pin your cattle on Saturday or Sunday, get those calves sorted off or pull them off ryegrass, you can really experience a lot of shrink. And of course, number of buyers is uncertain. It may be a small amount if you have a challenging situation. If you don't have a big order buying firm that shows up one day, it can definitely hurt the prices. Okay, we'll move on, Jason. Okay, one area that, and this has happened some in the state of Louisiana, I think it's going to be something that a lot of people look into in the future, is pooled or group sales. And that's basically pooling your cattle together with other producers in your area to get truckload lots. When we're talking about marketing cattle, we're talking about two totally different things. There's a dividing line there. The dividing line is whether you can provide a truckload of cattle or not. When we're talking about a truckload of cattle, we're talking about around 50,000 pounds of cattle, 18-wheeler load that are uniform, fairly uniform. We're talking about either steers or heifers. You have some mixed load lots that get sold, but that can be a little challenging. I'll talk about that in just a minute. Advantages of pooling cattle together to form those truckload lots is you can get larger, more uniform lots to sell, and the buyers are attracted to larger lots, and that doesn't matter whether it's a sale barn or wherever. The larger lots of cattle that are similar, it increases buying competition. The disadvantages of pooled group selling of cattle is it can be labor intensive, okay, and that starts with your breeding season and making sure that everybody's on the same breeding season and on similar genetics when we're talking about black or black-hided cattle, or whether we're using a Charolais cross type cow, trying to get that similar load. And, you know, of course, it takes a lot of labor to do all this, to get these cattle put together. You have to have a central location, have to be coordinated with everybody on when they're going to get the cattle penned. Of course, not even going to talk about, but vaccine protocols, I think it was mentioned earlier in the presentation, but getting those cattle up, getting them penned the same day, getting them to a central facility, get them weighed, get them sorted. It can be challenging to find a facility like that. And of course, I think we'll mention it briefly here in just a minute. Having to have certified scales, of course, to weigh these cattle on as they go across. Okay, Jason. Video auction. This is a huge way to sell cattle. Once again, this is a option on these truckload lots of cattle, or cattle that you can get 50,000 pounds on. Cattle are recorded while in the pasture normally. I think we're talking about outfits like Superior on this, although there are some other ones. And they broadcast pictures of your cattle along with descriptions of how they're grown, location, estimated weights, vaccination, herd health, things like that. They're broadcast on satellite TV or internet. The internet auction is getting to be a very popular option. Advantages, of course, there's a large number of potential buyers. You can have folks looking at your cattle from all over the United States. You're kind of directly selling to the buyer. Delivery schedules, it can be worked around your schedule. You know, you'll see a lot of spring-born calves sold months in advance, as far as that goes. And also commission rates can be a little lower because there again, they don't have the set facility, that infrastructure needed to process cattle like a normal sale barn. Disadvantages is once again, big one is truckload lots. You've got to have that truckload. May require a producer to have scales like we talked about. You got to have those certified scales, guys. And just because you got some load bars under your chute does not necessarily mean that those scales are certifiable. And so we'll get on into that maybe later on. Okay, Jason. Forward pricing contracts. This can be a very beneficial tool whenever you're talking about marketing your cattle, and that's setting a price with a buyer on an expected sale date in the future. And there's a lot of firms out there, order buying firms, ranchers, stockers, people that will set a forward price on cattle. And its price is often based on what their break-evens are going to run. Advantages to forward pricing your cattle with a seller is it can reduce the risk. It can reduce negative impact from sudden changes in the market. You can kind of lock in the price that you think is acceptable. Of course, the disadvantage is this: you can't guarantee a profit due to unknown costs. You know, death loss is on you, of course. And once again, on the other side of the spectrum from locking in a good price, if you lock in that price, you won't be able to realize profit from an increased profit in prices at the time of delivery. So basically, all that to say this: if price goes up, you're still stuck with that lower price if you lock in those cattle. but it is a good tool, and some producers are starting to utilize that. Okay, Jason. Private tree, this is once again a emerging method you see with a lot of folks as far as selling their cattle. It's directly marketing or marketing to a niche market, basically selling cattle straight off your place to individuals, restaurants, retail stores, places like that. While we're on private treaty, we'll just mention briefly that there are a lot of stocker growers and feedlot operators now who have buying stations or ways that you can market your cattle directly to them. It bypasses the auction process and of course the commission process. But many consumers today, they want more and more to have a closer connection with the production of food, and this trend has increased sales of beef products direct to the consumer. Many producers are motivated by the higher prices they can command and by a desire to produce and market locally raised food. The selling of cattle directly to the consumer has really taken off, I'd say, in the last year or two. There's quite a few producers in our neck of the woods that have started marketing cattle directly to the consumer, and some of them are selling whole beef. In other words, they're feeding out cattle and selling wholes. They're selling halves. But the newest trend on this, on the direct marketing, is selling cuts individually. So that's a huge thing. Okay, Jason. And retained ownership. This is something that's always been an option. That's basically holding your cattle through the next stage of production, whether that be holding your cattle and grazing them on ryegrass or other winter pasture, or contracting with somebody to graze your cattle for you, or ultimately taking them to the feedlot and retaining ownership through the feedlot. Advantages on something like this is you can see those returns as you carry those cattle through each production phase. Disadvantages is, of course, you have to have places to put the cattle. You have to have avenues to market the cattle. You have to have a good banker that's willing to work with you on interest costs, and of course the risk is all on you as far as death loss or any added costs on that. Okay, Jason.
All right, Ashley.
Thank you, Lee. And to wrap up and answer a couple of questions, I had two questions come in on chat from me, to me directly, excuse me. So first question was related to pregnancy determination blood tests. And the question was, why do you have to wait on the blood pregnancy test for nursing cows? The easiest way to answer that is the hormone that they are testing is still being produced roughly 60 days post calving. So you would get a false positive if you tested it any sooner than that. Just think of the uterine involution postpartum period. So we're trying to get the uterus back to a state that can support pregnancy again. So there's still a lot of hormone production and things going on there that need to balance out before you can test those cows, excuse me. And the other question was regarding to posting this webinar. So this webinar will be posted in the future, near future, hopefully. It will be somewhere on LSUAgCenter.com. We're not sure yet if it's going to go directly to the LSU AgCenter YouTube channel or be posted under the beef cattle page on LSUAgCenter.com. But we will get it up and we will advertise it the same way we advertised this webinar. So if you do have any other questions for Jason, Lee, Vince, or me, you can use the contact information that you can see here, or you can find us at lsuagcenter.com. Just use the search bar to search for our names. We would like to thank you again for joining us in our Beef Brunch webinar this morning. We will be hosting another one in May, and that will be on May 12th at 10:30 a.m. And it is What's Bugging You? And that will feature Dr. Sebe Brown and Mr. Jason Holmes. So we will send out a flyer with a link and information to that webinar in the future. And if you have any other questions regarding our Beef Brunch educational series, please feel free to contact me. Again, my email is akedwards@agcenter.lsu.edu, or you can reach me at 512-818-5476. Thank you again for joining, and thank you, Jason, Lee, and Vince, for helping us present.